Some stories are just so massive, so world-changing, that we can kind of forget about the real human hearts that were beating right at the center of it all. Today, we're going to explore a really powerful poem by Denis Martindale. It was inspired by the TV series The Chosen, and it does something pretty remarkable. It takes one of the most famous events in all of history and asks us to see it through a completely new and incredibly personal set of eyes. All right, let's get into it.
So right off the bat, the poem wants us to make a big shift in how we look at this story. On one side, you have the icon, that grand, beautiful, but kind of distant view we get from sculptures or stained glass windows. But the poem, it wants to give us the experience, the up-close, raw, immediate view from a mother's gaze as she watches her son's sacrifice. And that's a huge leap, right? From the monumental down to the deeply, deeply personal. I mean, we're all familiar with stories being told this way. When a story gets this old, this famous, it can start to feel more like a legend than something that actually happened. We see it in art, we hear the words read, but that raw human feeling, it can get a little lost behind that beautiful but frozen image. Yeah, these are the classic ways we've always pictured the crucifixion. And they're powerful, for sure, no doubt about it. But this poem, a lot like the show that inspired it, wants to pull us past these familiar images. It wants to, break the glass, so to speak, and put us right there on the ground with everyone else, feeling the grit and the grief. And this is how it pulls it off. The entire story pivots on this one crucial shift in our point of view. Suddenly, we're not just another face in the crowd watching from a distance. Nope. We are seeing this whole horrible event unfold through the eyes of his mother, Mary, the very first person to witness her firstborn child, and bam! The poem's opening line just reframes everything. Instantly, this isn't about some distant theological figure. That language, the firstborn of her womb, it grounds the entire story in the most basic, powerful human connection there is, a mother and her child. It's so deliberate, and it's just achingly personal. And the poem does not pull any punches. It doesn't give us some sanitized, artistic version of events. No. We are immediately dropped into the brutal reality of what Mary is forced to see. She's not just observing a crucifixion as an event, she is witnessing the physical act of nails being pressed into her son. Okay, so the poem then gives this raw experience a clear structure. It's not just a single snapshot of grief. Instead, it walks us through the entire agonizing ordeal, moment by moment. It's a 6-hour vigil on a hill called Calvary. Now, you have to understand, this timeline isn't just a sequence of events on a clock. It's really a measure of endurance. It starts at 9 in the morning when he's raised up, goes through those long, horrible midday hours filled with the jeers and cries of the crowd, all the way to that final gut-wrenching moment at 3 o'clock. For Mary, every single one of those seconds must have felt like a lifetime. And right here, this is where you feel the absolute helplessness at the center of her experience. It's not just that she's watching her son suffer. She's also forced to listen to the cruelty of the crowd around her. And the poem asks this just devastating question: what could she possibly do? The answer is nothing, absolutely nothing, except bear witness and cry. It's the ultimate picture of a parent's powerlessness. So from that feeling of being totally helpless on the outside, the poem takes us somewhere even more intimate, inside Mary's own mind. In the middle of all that noise and chaos, we get to hear her internal monologue. It's a desperate prayer, but it's not for a miracle. It's for something else entirely. Her first question is something any one of us might ask if we saw someone we loved in that much pain. How long? It's a raw human plea for the suffering to please just end, a cry for release. But then this second question comes, and this one is on another level of anguish. Just think about this. She is now praying for the one thing she must dread more than anything in the world, her own son's death. Because in that moment, his last breath has become the only act of mercy left. The pain is so overwhelming that death is the only escape she can hope for him. So after taking us on this incredibly harrowing journey, what's the ultimate point? What do we actually gain from seeing this epic story from the foot of the cross through a mother's eyes? What does this perspective really show us? Well, for one, the poem shows this stark contrast between Mary's deep connection and the crowd's chilling indifference. For some of them, this was just a show, a spectacle. They watched for a bit, and then they just turned around and walked away. The poem calls it their blindness, and it stole any sense of compassion. They saw the event, but they completely missed the humanity.
And this right here, this brings us to the very heart of the poem. This is the key that unlocks the entire experience. Through her eyes, we see so much more than just a historical or religious event. We discover a depth, a dimension to the story that's so easy to miss otherwise.
So what is all this much more that we're seeing? Well, it's the unbelievable depth of a mother's grief, mixed with the quiet strength of her faith. It's the real, human cost of a divine plan. It's the pain of being so misunderstood. Really, what we're seeing is the very heart of what's often called the greatest story ever told.
And that's the real beauty of looking at it this way. It doesn't shrink the story or take away from its significance, not at all. In fact, by grounding the greatest story ever told in a mother's profound love and her unbearable loss, the poem gives it this renewed, powerful, and deeply human core.
So we'll just leave you with this thought. This explainer was all about one story, seen through a different lens. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories, big or small, in history or even in our own lives, do we think we know inside and out, but would only truly understand if we took a moment to see them through someone else's eyes?